But David and Carmen were building their case methodically. Former employees began coming forward, sharing stories they'd kept buried for years. A maintenance worker described being locked in a basement storage room for hours as discipline. A housekeeper testified about being forced to work while injured, denied workers' compensation. The breakthrough came when Carmen's investigator found Rosa Martinez, Elena's cousin who'd worked for Richard's first startup in the 1990s. Rosa had kept detailed records of her experience, discriminatory emails, witness statements, even recordings of threats made when she tried to report wage theft. "They made me sign a non-disclosure agreement," Rosa explained during their meeting. "Paid me $15,000 to disappear and never speak about what happened. But NDAs don't cover criminal activity." The evidence was devastating. Rosa's files showed a pattern spanning 30 years. The Whitmores systematically exploited vulnerable workers, particularly immigrants and people of color, using their wealth and legal connections to silence victims. Miguel's case became the catalyst that broke open decades of abuse. When David filed the lawsuit, other victims found courage to step forward. The trickle became a flood as more workers shared their experiences with wage theft, discrimination, and assault. The Whitmore's empire began cracking under scrutiny. Tech industry partners distanced themselves from Marcus's companies. Hotel chains canceled contracts with Whitmore properties. Stock prices plummeted as investors fled, spooked by the mounting legal troubles. Federal investigators launched parallel criminal investigations into tax evasion, labor violations, and conspiracy charges. Dawn raids on Whitmore offices yielded boxes of incriminating documents that had somehow escaped their lawyers' shredding efforts. The trial became a media sensation. Miguel testified about years of systematic humiliation, while dozens of other workers shared similar experiences. Video evidence showed Richard striking employees. Audio recordings captured Marcus making racist jokes about staff, and financial records proved systematic wage theft totaling millions. Marcus tried to claim his champagne incident was generational humor that modern society had misunderstood. Amanda insisted they'd always treated workers fairly, that accusations were fabricated by opportunistic lawyers. Richard blamed everything on subordinates who'd exceeded their authority. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on multiple counts. The judge sentenced Richard to 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy and tax evasion. Marcus received 3 years for labor violations and assault. Amanda faced civil penalties and community service. The family's assets were liquidated to establish a $50 million victim compensation fund. Their hotel was sold to a cooperative that prioritized worker ownership and fair wages. The Whitmore name disappeared from San Francisco's business landscape almost overnight. 6 months later, Miguel stood at the podium in the ballroom where his humiliation had been recorded. The space had been transformed into a community center and legal aid clinic for service workers. Sophia sat in the front row, her Berkeley acceptance letter framed on the wall behind her. "Half a year ago, I stood in this room thinking my life was over," Miguel began, his voice steady despite the emotion. "I was wrong. That night wasn't my ending. It was the beginning of something much larger than myself." He looked out at the crowd of workers, advocates, and reporters who'd gathered for the center's opening. This victory belongs to everyone who refused to stay silent. To Rosa, who kept records for 30 years waiting for justice. To Elena, who connected us with others who'd suffered. to every worker who found courage to speak truth to power. Carmen approached the podium as Miguel concluded, carrying a bronze plaque. "The Santos Center for Worker Justice," she read aloud, "dedicated to ensuring dignity and fairness for all who labor." The applause echoed off walls that had once witnessed his shame, but now celebrated his triumph. Sofia bounded onto the stage, wrapping him in a fierce hug as cameras captured their joy. Later that evening, Miguel and Sofia visited their father's grave. The modest headstone now had company, a garden bench, and memorial plaque, honoring all workers who died fighting for dignity. "I kept my promise, Papa," Miguel said quietly, placing fresh marigolds by the headstone. "Sofia's going to college, and we're making sure no one else has to choose between dignity and survival." As sunset painted the Oakland hills golden, Miguel felt his father's presence in the evening breeze. Not the weight of obligation anymore, but the lightness of a promise fulfilled and a legacy of justice that would outlive them all.